A Great Argead Saga Alexein, Alexander the Great. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Macaulay Naki. Episode 50, Ciphered Skytale of the Argeads. Late night, October 7th, the secluded quarters, Pella. The night air stagnated heavily, thick with the scent of pine smoke and the solemn, rhythmic reverberations of military hymns echoing from the distant Theban camp. Inside the bedchamber, illuminated by the flickering glow of candles, a sanctuary completely insulated from the rapacious eavesdropping of courtiers, Eurydice and Gygaia stood rigid, side by side, frozen in a rare and absolute instant of alignment. Once fierce rivals vying for the innermost heart of a single king, these two noble women now stood as the final, cold sentinels defending the survival of their bloodline. Before them stood the remaining sons of the late King Amyntas III, along with Princess Eurynoe. The throne sat empty, a silent, mocking void. The young King Alexander II was dead, murdered by the shadow of the regency, and his brother Perdiccas, now the nominal king, was little more than a prisoner of protocol, his movements stifled by the insidious tyranny of Ptolemy. Flanking the grieving brothers stood 17-year-old Argeads, Philip, and Menelaus. Between them, hovering like a vengeful specter, stood the princess. The court had become a labyrinthine chain of fractured rooms, each one a cell where loyalty was weighed against survival. Ptolemy had affixed his signature to the official decree, a masterful stroke of cruelty that forced the sons of Gygaia to remain in Pella as gilded captives, while banishing Philip to Thebes. He thinks he is placing a pawn on a distant board, Philip thought, the bitterness tasting like bile at the back of his throat. He believes he is isolating me from the heart of the kingdom, effectively neutering the line of Amyntas before I have even drawn my first true breath of power. It was a stratagem designed for total eradication. Ptolemy hoped that distance would starve their ambition and dissolve the bond of the brothers into resentment on silence. Ptolemy believes that by interposing a mountain range and 3 city-states, he has severed the Argead line. Gygaia spoke, her voice a fluid, bottomless silk thread of intrigue that belied the steel in her heart. She's right, Philip mused, watching his mother's hands, which remained as steady as if she were arranging flowers rather than plotting the ruin of a regent. He views us as disjointed pieces, failing to see that the Argead spirit is not defined by geography, but by the hunger that binds us. He deludes himself into thinking that the physical exchange of official dispatches is the sole means of dialogue. Truly, how pathetic. Eurydice reached inside a small cedar box, her movements precise and hushed. She pulled out 5 identical strips of unwritten papyrus and 5 cipher sticks, skytales, carved to a uniform, deceptively simple diameter. She handed them out, her touch lingering on each boy's hand, a silent transmission of steel. This is the key, Philip thought, feeling the polished wood of the rod against his palm. This is not merely a tool, it is a declaration of war disguised as a child's toy. The Spartans revere this as a stick cipher, Eurydice whispered, her eyes darting toward the heavy oak doors, where Ptolemy's guard stood sentinel, their shadows looming long and threatening. She is terrified, yet she does not blink. Philip noted with a swell of dark, cold pride. But what our house possesses is different. The geometric diameter of these wooden rods perfectly matches the thickness of Amyntas's legitimate royal signet ring. Unless this papyrus is wound precisely around a rod of this exact diameter, the characters arrayed upon it are nothing more than the remnants of an idiot's babble. She demonstrated the structure, her fingers moving with the grace of a master weaver. Philip watched, his mind racing to commit every rotation, every angle to memory. As the strip spiraled tight, the chaotic, meaningless letters suddenly locked into a stark, lucid decree. He thinks he has sent me into exile, Philip realized, his pulse quickening with a lethal, quiet thrill. He thinks I'm a broken hostage. But he has given me the very geometry of his own destruction, and he is too arrogant to see that the message is already written in the wood. If you send letters disguised as poetry or ledgers, Ptolemy's spies will intercept them and dismiss them with a sneer, Gygaia taught, her gaze locking onto Philip's eyes. But beneath the layout of those words, you will conceal our true proclamations. Only when wound around this wood will the abyss of truth be exposed. Poetry, ledgers, lies. Philip thought, the cold precision of his mother's instruction sharpening his focus. He sees us as children playing with ink, never suspecting that we are etching his execution into the very grain of the rod. He counts coins while we count the beats of his heart. Philip looked at the Skytale, his features hardening into a cold, predatory mask. The surging heat of his blood made his fist tighten around the wood, the hard surface biting into his palm. Let him underestimate me. Let him believe the boy sent away as a boy broken. He's providing me the very vantage point to watch him wither. Philip, Eurydice stepped forward, gripping the boy's narrow shoulder. The weight of her hand was a sudden anchor, grounding him in the gravity of the room. Do you resent your fate? Being sent to Thebes as a hostage? Philip looked back with unyielding light in his eyes. Resentment? No. Resentment is for those who expect justice from tyrants. Far from it, he replied, his voice devoid of the tremor of youth. Ptolemy intends to render me powerless, but to me, this is the ultimate ticket to infiltrate the very heart of Greece's strongest army. At the boy's defiant words, a faint, mirthless smirk touched the lips of the queens. They saw not a child, but the weapon they had forged. Princess Eurynoe stepped forward, her eyes possessing her mother's cruel beauty, a mirror of the same ruthless ambition that burned in Philip's own chest. Ptolemy believes that because I am a woman, I will cower and submit to whatever marriage Betty dictates, Eurynoe said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. And he is right to fear me, she thought, her internal resolve a coiled viper. While he looks for threats in the barracks and the council, he will never think to look under the veil of the girl he treats as a trophy. How foolish of him, she continued aloud. While Perdiccas struggles on a throne, he barely commands, I shall act as nothing more than a powerless princess. I will spy from the shadows upon Ptolemy's chamber whispers. And I shall send it to you through this wood. The princess pressed a finger against Philip's chest, smiling coldly, a shared, silent compact of violence. Go to the house of Pamines. Encircled by the might of the sacred band, they will lecture you on how to slaughter flesh with a spear. But you, Philip, must master the wisdom of how to slaughter a nation with a whisper. A nation with a whisper, Philip repeated to himself, the weight of the task settling into his marrow. I will learn the spear to survive, but I will learn the secret to rule. Every movement of the Theban army, Epaminondas's health, the subtle flaws in their phalanx, engrave it all and send it back to us, she commanded. The crown of Macedon must never fall to that usurper. It will not, Philip vowed, the thought ringing with the finality of a funeral bell. Ptolemy thinks he's sending me to be a hostage. He's merely sending me to be his shadow, and by the time I return, his shadow will be the only thing left of him. Archelaus nodded, his face drawing into a harsh, resolute line. Philip, you shall be our eyes in the south, while we remain your ears in the north and the fangs within the palace walls. Everything to reclaim our sovereignty. The fangs, Philip thought, the metaphor tasting of iron and fresh blood. We are no longer brothers competing for a father's favor. We are the scattered pieces of a broken blade, sharpening ourselves in the dark until we can reunite to cut the throat of the man who stole our birthright. This is the final counsel we can offer, Eurydice said, her eyes flashing with fierce, cold pride. In Macedon, the man who shouts is the quickest to be cast into the grave. But those who exchange whispers from the depths of the shadows, they are the ones who will eventually seize the Son of Heaven, the Son of Heaven, Philip mused, the words echoing with a hollow, terrifying grandeur. She speaks of the throne as if it were a god to be appeased, yet I know better. It is not a gift from the heavens, it is a weight to be seized from the dirt. She teaches me to whisper, yet every fiber of my being screams to roar. I will master the whisper, mother, but only so that when I finally choose to shout, the entire world will be forced to kneel. Philip slipped the rod into the secret folds of his tunic, the wood pressing against his ribs like a rhythmic wooden heart. He looked at his brothers and sister, former rivals now purified into his only absolute allies. They did not indulge in the luxury of an embrace. Such warmth would have felt like a lie in a room defined by the cold necessity of survival. In the house of the Argeads, such displays were for the weak, the unproven, the lost. They simply exchanged silent, lethal glances of accord, a wordless covenant written in the shared understanding that any one of them would gladly see the others burn if it meant the survival of the crown. They are mine, and I am theirs, he realized, a grim satisfaction settling deep in his chest. The regent has separated us, believing he has fractured a monolith, but he has only succeeded in planting seeds in different soils. We will grow, we will reach, and we will strangle him from all sides. The secret was secured. Though their bloodline had been severed by the regent's machinations, its spirit was bound fast by the geometry of wood and papyrus. Philip turned, bowing once to the queens, and prepared for the morning's march. Tomorrow, I go to Thebes as a broken thing, he thought as he walked toward the heavy oak door. But I carry the weight of an empire in my tunic. Let the Thebans train me. Let them refine me. I am not leaving Pella. I am merely moving to the theater where I will write the ending of Ptolemy's play. In his hand, he carried an invisible, absolute voice, disguised as a single, broken hostage. The air in the Epirus chambers was thick, a stifling cocktail of cedarwood smoke, and the damp, cloying stench of winter mud tracked in by panicked couriers. King Neoptolemus, I hovered over a map of the north, his knuckles bone-white as he dug his fingernails into the parchment of the western border. Across from him, General Lycomedes paced with the heavy, predatory rhythm of a caged leopard, his boots gouging the floorboards. The intelligence is confirmed, Lycomedes grunted, his voice a gravelly scrape that seemed to vibrate against the stone walls. Pelopidas has closed the trap. Philip the boy king's last brother is being marched south to Thebes as a guest of the Cadmea. He is not alone. 67 noble sons, the marrow of every major house in Macedonia, are being paraded as guarantees. They aren't hostages, Neoptolemus. They are the new blood of a Theban empire. 67 futures traded like cattle, Neoptolemus thought, the sheer scale of the betrayal making his vision swim. They haven't just stolen the princes, they've stolen the very leverage that held the mountain tribes at bay. Every one of those boys was a tether, a blood oath that ensured peace in the borderlands. Now, that oath is a Theban collar. Neoptolemus turned, his face a landscape of exhaustion. 67, he echoed, the number hanging in the air like a death sentence. It is not diplomacy, it is systematic extraction. They are carving the bones out of Macedonia. If the north collapses, Epirus becomes the inevitable next course for the Illyrians. We are surrounded by famine and greed, Neoptolemus mused, his mind cataloging the failing alliances he had spent years nurturing. Thebes acts with the surgical precision of an assassin, peeling back the layers of Macedonia until nothing remains but a hollow husk. And once the husk is empty, they will look to us. They think we are safe behind the ranges, but they don't understand that a border is only as strong as the neighbor protecting it. We are already standing in the shadow of their next move. In the corner, Queen Andromache sat, her hands trembling as they cradled her swollen belly. Her face was a mask of primal, white-knuckled terror. "My child is not even born," she whispered, her voice a thin, fragile thread, and already the world is being carved up by wolves. If the Cadmea controls the Macedonian nobility, they control the mountain passes. The Illyrians see this. They know the north is no longer a shield, it's an open gate. They won't carve Macedonia anymore. They will be breaking down our door. She speaks for the future, and her fear is the only truth in this room, Neoptolemus reflected, watching her eyes dart toward the darkened windows. She feels the tremors of an empire's collapse before they even reach our shores. While I worry about the balance of power and the logistics of infantry, she feels the cold blade at her child's throat. And she is right, the wolves are not coming for the border. They are coming for the cradle. Polixena stood by the narrow window, tracing the silver filigree of her brooch until her fingertips were raw, the sharp metal biting into her skin, as if to anchor her to the reality of the room. He is already looking past our walls, she thought, the realization settling like ice in her veins. Bartolus does not care for the political chess match in Pella. He is a scavenger who smells the rot of a dying kingdom, and he knows exactly when the shield has fallen. "The Illyrians are already testing our threshold, father," she said, her voice steady despite the frantic thrum of her heart. Bartolus isn't waiting for the ink to dry on Theban treaties. He is watching the border turn soft. He senses the hesitation. Hesitation is the prelude to an invasion, she mused, staring out at the darkening horizon where the mountains seemed to press closer, shadows lengthening like grasping fingers. Every day we spend debating the legitimacy of regions and the reach of Theban influence. He is counting our centuries. He's not a storm that builds. He is the tide that has already begun to rise. They are beyond testing, Troas added, his arrival marked by the hollow metallic clank of plate armor, a sound that usually brought comfort but now served only as a reminder of how brittle their defenses truly were. His armor sounds too heavy, too slow, Polizina noted, her mind shifting to the grim arithmetic of siege warfare. If he's back already, the distance between the foothills and our gates has effectively vanished. The scouts report a massing of spears in the foothills, Troas continued, his voice tight with the strain of suppressed urgency. The Illyrians aren't raiding for cattle. They are massing for a push. They know the north is paralyzed by the Theban shadow. The Theban shadow, Polizina echoed internally, the weight of the phrase crushing. We are being dismantled from the south, and because of it, we are being devoured from the north. We are trapped in a pincer of our own making, waiting for a savior who is currently trading our brothers for leverage in a foreign land. God help us, there is no shield left, only the wait for the first spear to strike. Neoptolemus scanned his family, his terrified wife, his resolute daughter, his grim commanders. The walls felt as though they were closing inward. Am a king of ghosts, he thought, a cold, bitter iron hardening in his chest. A kingdom fracturing, a child coming into a world of ash, and borders treated like an open grave. Like Amyntas, Neoptolemus commanded, his voice slicing through the gloom. Forget the Thebans. If the Cadmea wants to forge an empire, let them deal with the consequences of an Illyrian storm. We focus on the pass. If they cross the threshold, we do not defend a border. We defend the house. I hope the gods are watching, Andromache prayed silently, pressing her palm against her womb as a sharp, sudden kick stirred within her. Because no man here, not even the king, can hold back the night. They are just boys, like Amyntas muttered, staring at the map. Philip and his brothers in arms. If they are in Thebes, they aren't here to hold the shield. The forge is in the south, but the fire is at our throat. Then let it burn, Troas spat, his hand white-knuckled on his sword hilt. If the north is lost, we die standing on our own soil. I will not have Epirus be the ash left behind by Theban greed. Polizina turned from the window, her eyes unnervingly bright. Sending Philip and those boys to Thebes, it is a masterstroke of cruelty. Nearly 70 of them? Queen Mother Eurydice and Pelopidas have decided to forge the next generation of generals, courtiers, and spies. Those boys will be Philip's royal pages. They will receive the same training, the same indoctrination, the same lethal mindset. When they return to Pella, Macedonia will not just be a kingdom, it will be a weapon. The silence that followed was suffocating. Neoptolemus looked at his family, the weight of the crown pressing into his skull like a physical crush of lead. The Argeads have their hostages, he mused, looking toward the dark rain-lashed peaks of the mountains. But they have left us alone with the wolves. Polizina stepped toward him, her gaze unwavering. Father, you must put aside the past. You need to speak with your brother, Uncle Eurydice. You must act as one. The time for competition died the moment those boys crossed the border to Thebes. Andromache nodded, her eyes locking onto the king's. She is right, my love. A divided Epirus will only invite the wolves closer. Neoptolemus exhaled, a long, weary sound, before his expression sharpened into a mask of resolve. Prepare the men, he said, his voice dropping into a low, chilling resonance. The Illyrians come to test the strength of the crown. We shall show them that while Epirus may be small, it is not a carcass to be scavenged. In the halls of the Athenian Bouleuterion, the news of the 70 hostages did not land as a diplomatic update. It landed as a seismic shift in the geometry of power. The air was thick with the scent of unlit oil lamps and the nervous, sour sweat of strategists who had spent their lives, assuming Macedonia was a disorganized collection of northern clans. We have been reading the map of a world that no longer exists, Callistratus thought, his stomach churning with the cold realization that their intelligence had failed them entirely. We treated Pella like a wild beast to be caged, never suspecting that the cage was being built by the very city we dared not challenge. Archon Callistratus stood by the great circular table, his eyes locked on the map where Thebes was marked in cold, encroaching ink. The ink looks like a stain, he mused, his fingers tightening against the edge of the wood until the joints ached. It is bleeding south, swallowing the north, and here we stand, debating rhetoric, while the future of our hegemony is being packed away into Theban barracks. Beside him, a seasoned spy master, A man whose face was etched with the secrets of a dozen failed coups traced the line from Pella to the Cadmea. 70, the spymaster hissed, the word barely a breath. They aren't just taking a king's brother. They are taking the entire intellectual and martial vanguard of the next generation. Pelopidas isn't just holding them, he is sculpting them. They will eat at the same table, sleep in the same barracks, and study the same geometry of war. When they return to Pella, they won't be Macedonians, they will be Thebans in northern skin. Sculpting them, Callistratus repeated internally, the phrase echoing with the finality of a funeral dirge. He's not merely holding hostages. He is creating a puppet state that will be more loyal to Theban tactics than to its own blood. By the time they go home, they will view the world through Theban eyes, and our interests will be nothing more than obstacles to be cleared. The council chamber of the Bouleuterion in Athens was a cavern of stale air and nervous energy, lit only by the flickering, oil-slick dance of lamps. Archon Callistratus stared at the map of the north, stretched across the central table, his finger tracing the path from the Macedonian capital of Pella down to the Theban gates. If we had moved faster, he thought, a spike of sharp, familiar regret piercing his composure. If we had offered our own tutelage before Pelopidas struck, we could have been the ones to hold their leash. Now we are simply spectators to our own irrelevance. To the untrained eye of a common citizen, it was mere geography. To the men gathered in this shadowed room, deep within the heart of the Athenian administrative center, it was a roadmap of their own obsolescence. 70, the spymaster breathed, the word hitting the stone floor like a pebble in a deep well. Nearly 70 sons of the Macedonian high houses. They are not merely guests of the Cadmea. They are being dismantled and reassembled. Dismantled, Callistratus pondered, his eyes finally lifting to meet the weary gaze of his advisors. Yes, and in their place, Thebes is building an empire that will stretch from the Aegean to the Balkans. We are watching the birth of a predator, and I fear we have already waited too long to stop it. Callistratus looked up, his eyes hard as flint. Explain. The spymaster leaned into the lamplight, his shadow stretching long and distorted across the table. Pelopidas isn't just holding them, Archon. He is sculpting them. He ticked off the points on his gaunt fingers, his voice a cold, measured cadence. First, the intellectual taming. By immersing the Argead prince and his peers in the very heart of Boeotian power, they are stripping away the northern wildness. Philip will not be raised a barbarian. He will be raised to see the world through the Theban lens, learning the intricacies of the phalanx, the brutal efficiency of their politics, and the relentless obsession with hegemony. They are teaching him how to think like a master. Callistratus felt a knot of dread tighten in his gut. They are teaching him to be a wolf, he thought, watching the light catch the spymaster's sharp predatory features. And wolves are dangerous only once they learn the value of the pack. Second, the spymaster continued, the puppet wire. Every Macedonian house with a son in those dungeons is now effectively neutered. They cannot draw a sword against Thebes when the blade would effectively be cutting their own sons' throats. It is a leash, Archon, and Thebes is holding the other end tight. A leash, Callistratus thought, the image manifesting in his mind as a tightening noose around the neck of Macedonian autonomy. Pelopidas hasn't just captured soldiers. He has captured the agency of an entire nobility. How do you lead a people who have already been convinced that their own children are the price of their peace? It is a masterpiece of political emasculation. And the third step? Callistratus asked, his voice barely a whisper, the weight of the realization pressing down on his chest like a leaden shroud. The sovereign weapon, the spymaster replied, his gaze dropping back to the map. This is the long-term play. Once Philip is sufficiently civilized, indoctrinated in the Theban way of governance, they will set him back on the throne in Pella. A client king, a sovereign who doesn't just hold the crown, but owes his education, his military training, and his very soul to the Boeotian League. A mirror image, Callistratus thought, his mind racing through the implications. If they succeed, the North ceases to be a buffer and becomes an extension of the Boeotian war machine. We aren't just losing an ally, we are watching our own executioner being trained in the enemy's barracks. Callistratus turned away, walking to the window that looked out over the darkened Aegean. A king who is a mirror image of his jailer, he mused, the cold sea air biting at his skin. Thebes isn't conquering Macedonia with spears. They are conquering it by becoming the architect of its future. They are stealing the soul of the north, and we are left to watch it happen from across the water. If they succeed, Callistratus murmured, his hands gripping the cold marble sill until his knuckles burned, it will be the end of Athenian relevance. A united, Theban-aligned north would crush our trade, strangle our ambitions, and force us into a corner we can never escape. There will be no more northern barbarians. There will be a northern extension of Theban power. And we, my friend, have just watched them lay the foundation of our own tomb. He turned back to the room, his voice dropping into a tone of chilling authority. We cannot stop them from taking the boys, but we can ensure they do not keep them. Find me the men who were left behind in Pella. Find the lords whose sons were not chosen. If Thebes wants to forge a weapon, we will ensure that the steel is flawed before it ever touches our shores. Flawed steel breaks under the slightest pressure, he calculated, a cold, predatory resolve rising to replace his dread. I don't need to defeat Pelopidas' strategy. I just need to sow enough discord in Pella that when the boy finally returns to claim his throne, he finds it sitting on a foundation of ash. If I cannot possess the weapon, I will ensure it shatters in their hands. The air in the council room grew heavy, the silence punctuated only by the distant rhythmic tolling of a temple bell, a sound that felt uncomfortably like the ticking of a clock. Callistratus leaned over the table, his eyes fixed on the spymaster. Find them, he urged silently, before the north forgets how to hate its masters. And the great king, he asked, his voice a low, raspy thread. Does Artaxerxes sit in Susa and applaud this? Or are we merely looking at the first, loose thread of a tapestry we are too small to see? A tapestry, Callistratus mused, his mind flashing to the vast, intricate weaves of the east. If the Persians are the weavers, then the Cadmea is merely their loom. They don't need to cross the Hellespont with 1,000,000 men if they can simply manipulate the north to strangle us from within. It is a terrifyingly elegant solution, a poison that works slowly, so we don't even realize we're dying until the final swallow. The spymaster hesitated, his gaze drifting to the flickering oil lamp. The Persians despise a strong, united Greece, Archon. They feed on our divisions, but they fear a chaotic north even more. If the great king is funding this, if he is the silent patron of this Theban tutelage, then he is playing a game far grander than mere troop movements. If Persian gold is feeding this, Callistratus realized, the air in the room suddenly feeling thin and depleted, then every guest at the Cadmea is a mercenary in disguise. We aren't fighting a city-state. We are fighting the wealth of an empire masquerading as local politics. How do you defend against an enemy who pays for your own ruin? The spymaster straightened, his face tightening. He doesn't need to conquer Greece with legions of immortals. He only needs to ensure the north remains a predictable, quiet extension of Theban power, a buffer that stifles our naval reach before it can even touch his interests. Callistratus looked down at the map, his throat suddenly parched. If the great king is the hand behind this, he thought, a cold sweat pricking his brow, then the gold flowing into the Cadmea isn't for barracks. It's for a cage. And we are already standing inside it, too distracted by our own reflection to see the bars. He stood, his face hardening into a mask of resolve that masked the frantic ticking of his mind. I cannot show them the fear, he reminded himself, gripping his robes until his palms burned. If the architects of this cage see us trembling, they will simply close the lock. If Thebes is building a wolf, then Athens must build a wall, not of stone, but of influence. He began to pace, his voice cutting through the heavy air with the sharpness of a blade. First, our intelligence must expand. Triple the presence of our agents in the foreigner's quarter. If these 70 boys are the future of Macedonia, we must know the name of every tutor, the content of every letter, and the measure of every loyalty. If Thebes wants to educate a prince, we will educate a dozen. We will turn their own guests into our eyes and ears. Infiltrate the tutors, he calculated, his thoughts shifting into the cold binary logic of survival. If I can buy a single tutor, I can whisper doubt into the ear of a king-to-be. A single seed of betrayal planted in a Theban classroom will grow into a forest of rebellion in the heart of their empire. He gestured to the Aegean, his hand hovering over the naval lanes. Second, the grain routes. The Persians fear our naval muscle. Let us remind them why. Increase the patrols. If the north becomes a unified Theban-Macedonian bloc, our supply lines to the Black Sea are the first thing they will look to strangle. We must make it clear that the sea belongs to the serpent, not the wolf. The sea is our only true territory, he mused, a grim comfort-taking route. As long as we hold the water, we are not fully contained. Let the wolf rule the mountain, the serpent controls the pulse of the world. Finally, he slammed a hand against the table, his knuckles stinging. Third, the wedge. Send envoys to the peripheral Macedonian lords, the ones whose sons were not lucky enough or cursed enough to be taken as guests. Remind them that Thebes has a long, bloody history of swallowing its allies. We must feed the suspicion of the northern barons. If they believe their heirs are being kept as cattle in Theban stalls, they will be very eager to hear the song of Athenian liberty. Feed their suspicion, he thought, a dark thrill of manipulation coursing through him. Jealousy is a far more potent fuel than loyalty. I will turn every parent in Macedonia into a dagger pointed at Peloponnes's back. Let them wonder if their sons are princes or hostages. The fear alone will do more damage than any army I could field. He moved to the window, watching the shadows stretch across the city like long-reaching fingers. While our philosophers debate the definitions of virtue in the academy, he realized with a terrifying intuitive clarity, Thebes is working in the dark. They are tempering the blade that will eventually sever the head of our world. I'm running out of time, and I'm the only one who seems to hear the whetstone grinding. He stood still, a silent sentinel in the deepening gloom, knowing that the battle for the future was being won in the kitchens of Thebes and the archives of Susa, leaving Athens to argue over the meaning of a sunset. Let them argue, he thought, turning back to the table with a cold, hollow focus. I will be the one who ensures we survive the night. To be continued in episode 51, Last Night in Macedon, a great Argead saga Alexein, Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. A new episode every single day. We are dropping a new episode every day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 15 to 30-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, perfect for your daily plunge into antiquity. Watch and listen now. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Bookmark Volume 1, Divine Oracle playlist. Join the Vanguard. Subscribe to follow the bloody rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our Vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below.